I'm Bridget. I'm Communications Manager.
Leslie Hervey, interim clerk.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
County Administrator Jeff Aludo.
They got to Jersey.
Okay, thank you so much. I am Stephanie Summerall Dumas, President of the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners. February the 1st is significant because February is recognized as Black History Month. But we should all know that Black history is actually American history. There are so many inventions, and I'll be talking about that more on either Thursday or Tuesday as it relates to all the inventions and things that have happened that Black Americans have done to create this America that we know. We will be acknowledging several people in the community that have done great things during Black History Month, but we're rescheduling our Thursday event for the following Thursday due to some possible weather conditions. Mr. Frank White Jr. is another one who has made history. There he is from Kansas City. we're not laughing at you, we're laughing with you. So I'm going to get right back to you in just 1 minute. Not only is February Black History Month, but believe it or not, it also marks the start of the Chinese Lunar Year. And this year, ironically, is the year of the tiger. Yeah. So I remember on who day, Frank? Who day?
Who they?
Who day?
That's a call that I'm not familiar with.
Yes, and I'm gonna take it right back to you, but I wanted to quote you when I first talked to you, our conversation, and you said, it's something about those stripes that really gets to me. And so I'm gonna open it up for you to say a few things. Welcome.
Well, thank you, and hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on again. I thought it would be under better circumstances, especially after seeing the first half. We're pretty excited, but you guys really showed a lot of resolve, and you showed the ability not only in this game but a previous game with Kansas City to rebound in the second half and show that you're a good second half team. And so I applaud you for your team's ability to stay in there and hang in there and accomplish a feat that not many teams have an opportunity to complete. I know my years in baseball with Kansas City and being part of the World Series team and winning a World Series, I kind of know the exhilaration that you guys feel right now. You just have one more hurdle to go, and I'm pulling for the AFC, so I'm pulling for the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So my congratulations to you guys, and this shirt fits pretty good actually. Very comfortable, and I see you have a beautiful jersey in the forefront of your meeting. So thank you all for extending the challenge. It was really great for us, and I think the youth group in Cincinnati and also the youth group here in Kansas City will benefit both from this game. So thank you for reaching out to us and making us a part of it.
Thank you so much. We're not done with you yet, but here's the jersey that we received for our victory. And it has Mahomes on the back, his number. So I wanted everybody to see that. Thank you so much.
Okay,
And as
you're
you mentioned a minute ago about the group that we had decided that would be fed by Kansas City. And I certainly appreciate your suggestion of feeding groups that were in need. We decided on YAP, which is a youth advocacy program. It fulfills our goals of the Boys to Men initiative. This initiative addresses the obstacles and pitfalls that are facing young men transitioning to adulthood. Our goal is to close the pipeline to prison, mentorship, build confidence, and instill hope. Unfortunately, due to the COVID, we've not been able to move forward. Your gesture provides a kickstart for this program. So we'll take some pictures when we go out to feed and send those back to you. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. And our youth group here in Kansas City, that's part of our Healthy KC East Side program, also will benefit. And this is awesome. These two groups have an opportunity to move forward in their lives. Also, you just let us know when you want us to ship the barbecue and we will ship it when you let us know. But we're really excited to be able to help in both cities.
Absolutely. And I think I heard you say that the Kansas Cityans will be rooting for the Bengals. Did I hear you say that?
Well, I can't speak for the Kansas Cityans, but but I can speak for myself because I'm speaking because they're the AFC and that's who I root for. And I will wear this. I'll make you a promise. I'll wear this during the game. I'll make you that promise.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And my colleagues, I'm sure, may want to say something to you also. Vice President Reese.
Yes, Madam President, I want to thank you for this. I think this is great. Thank you, Kansas City. You guys hosted us very well, and we came out of there with the win. But like you said, now we're united, and our quarterback is ready to go, and your quarterback told our quarterback, let's win it. It's now all
Yes, sir.
about our division winning this Super Bowl. So
That
thank
is
you.
better.
And is that Gates Barbecue you sending?
It sure is.
Madam President, I may want to put a little extra on there. I'm willing to cash app them something to send a little Gates Barbecue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, I too want to thank you. You know, the game, I was worried as you were jubilation after the first half of that game, but we managed to pull it out as we often do in the second half. But thank you so much for your generosity. I mean, the program is worthy. And from my understanding, everybody that went out to your fair city and your fair county had a wonderful time and were treated with a lot of generosity. So thank you to you and your community for hosting us for the game last weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay, we'll move on to our second item on the agenda, COVID-19 comprehensive update.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to really, quite frankly, continue the trend of what we were discussing last week, which generally speaking is lots of positive numbers and things heading in the right direction. There still is COVID in the community, and so we still need to continue to exercise caution and wear those masks and do the things that we are doing as a community to help keep our numbers low. So to get started, the first slide here, I often talk about how many active cases of COVID. And this week will be a week of reflection. Last week, we were at 38,000. This week, we are at 31,000. So we shaved off 7,000 active cases of COVID within our community. The other very graphic slide, just 2 weeks ago, we were at 2,470 cases per day. That's a 7-day average. Today, 963. So really puts it into perspective that we're heading in the right direction. I have the opportunity to talk to my colleagues, health commissioners from the other 8 or 9 large health departments around the state of Ohio, and they are experiencing very similar trends, which is very hopeful for our entire state that we are heading in the right direction. Just to throw back to what I shared a few weeks back when I kind of showed the map changing. This is November, December, January, and here we are finally in January. We're not out of the woods yet, but you can definitely see the relief showing up throughout Hamilton County. Lots of activity still, but much better than we were just a month ago. And I suspect that map will continue to change for the positive over the coming weeks. Our reproductive value continues to be very low. We are at 0.62 today for Hamilton County. Our region is at 0.70. Our percent positivity also is continuing to plummet. We are at 23.1% for the region. Hamilton County is at 21%. Looking at hospitalizations, these are also coming down. Our hospitals continue to be busy though, so we still need to keep that into perspective. We are very high still. They're all active, but when you compare us to where we were a week ago, we're in a much better spot. Today, we were at 773 for hospitalizations. A week ago, we were at 950. So we've definitely given our hospitals some room to breathe. The intensive care units still are busy and are not seeing the same dramatic drop. Today, we were at 168 individuals. A week ago, we were at 192. And then those individuals on ventilators, we have 122 individuals compared to 130. So once again, not as significant in that regard. Deaths continue to play out that we're seeing between 4 and 5 deaths per day, which is really, those are real people that are dying within our community. At the request of you last week, I did prepare some data for you. I'll first touch on the difference between count and rates for those who are watching and unfamiliar. Counts are the actual number of people within Hamilton County that have either been hospitalized or have passed away due to COVID. The rates, we look at population and try to normalize that data so we can do a better job comparing. With regards to age and hospitalizations, the rate of hospitalizations increased by age, with the most significant increase for those over the age of 80. So that's fairly similar to what we've talked about throughout the pandemic. The older individuals, particularly for some of the earlier variants, definitely had the greatest impact. With regards to sex, we are not seeing any variation of notice between males and females. And then with regards to race, while we are seeing more white individuals that were hospitalized in Hamilton County, the rate of hospitalizations among Black and African American residents was twice that of white residents. We had a discussion internally. I think probably the number one factor, if I had to guess, really is related to vaccination rates. We know that vaccinations is the number one key for keeping individuals out of the hospital. And it's for that reason that my office has really worked hard to bring vaccinations to communities where we know that there's minority populations or hesitant populations. I'd also like to commend the commissioners. It's the work that you're doing with closing the health gap and trying to understand why there's hesitancy that I feel like when you compare us to the state of Ohio, our rates are lower in this population. I think that also holds true across the board when you look at all of the rates up on the board, whether it's regardless of age or sex or race. Ohio is at a higher rate than Hamilton County. And I think that's because of some of our collaborations and our work. And I don't want to dismiss the great work of our hospital systems. They've done a lot here too within our county. Switching over to death data for COVID-19, we see somewhat similar trends. The higher age you are, the more likely you are to succumb to COVID-19. With regards to sex, once again, very little differentiation between males and females. With regards to race, the good news is while race had an impact on rates with hospitalizations, the rate is much more equal across races. So if you're in the hospital and receiving care, the outcome is much better overall. And once again, when you compare deaths here in Hamilton County, we have lower death rates when compared to the state of Ohio, which is really truly attributed, in my opinion, to the great care that we have here within our hospital systems. And I will plan to provide, that those data points won't change weekly, but I will plan to provide that data at some frequency moving forward, so you'll have access to it. Turning to the Ohio the CDC transmission map, these numbers continue to improve, although the state remains high transmission. Hamilton County remains high transmission. The numbers are declining. Hamilton County is at 665 cases per 100,000. And just about 21% for the positivity. A little different view on vaccination rates. We have met the regional goal for everyone over the age of 60, which is 80% vaccination rates. We have met the national goal for everyone over the age of 40, which is fantastic. Still lots of room to go, but that's really impressive for our community to have achieved that. And then we're getting very close for those between the ages of 30 and 39. Obviously, we have a lot of work still to do for those younger demographics. And so once again, my team is really continuing to work with schools and trying to figure out ways to bring vaccine to the community where it's most needed. The website Test and Protect Cincy remains the truthful spot to look for vaccination information, testing information. And so if you're trying to find one of those tests or vaccines, I'd recommend you go there. And then lastly, a reminder, we do have a homebound team of nurses that go to homes for individuals that are unable to get out and about. And so if you know someone that needs us to come to them within Hamilton County's jurisdiction, the phone number is 946-7800, option 6, or you could visit our website. But we'd love to continue to bring the vaccine to those who need it, even if you're not able to get out and about. I will stop there and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. There are lots of people doing lots of hard work, and so we'll continue, and the data shows that. And I'm just hoping that the numbers continue to go down as we think about our football game we just had and the people that were from here that were in Kansas and then coming back here. And we hope that does not increase our numbers. So we'll keep thinking positive about
I'm
that. So,
Thinking it as well.
yeah, absolutely. Vice President Reese.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for your work and collaboration as our County Health Commissioner. I really don't have any questions, but I do want to put something I think is important. Health Commissioner Moore from the city of Cincinnati, for those who are watching, Cincinnati and Norwood, and I believe Springdale have their own health commissions, and we've been working collaboratively with you. And I just want to make sure, I know she's resigning and leaving that post, and she worked collaboratively with you. As county commissioners, we're elected the whole county. We don't have areas that we don't represent. We represent all of Hamilton County, including Cincinnati. And so I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know who the next person is, who that contact is, but certainly that'll be a loss in terms of her knowledge and working together with you. And just wanted to make sure that, I don't know who's next in line, that they're able to pick that up, or if they need our help as they're ramping up, that we don't lose anything as it relates to dealing with this, and we can work with the next person. I don't know if you had anybody contact you regarding that to let people know there'll be no lapse in the collaboration that we've had.
We'll work collaboratively. I actually was one of the first calls to Commissioner Moore after finding out about her resignation, and I plan to work with her over the next 30 days. It's my understanding the city has nominated or put in place Dominic Hobson as their interim health commissioner. Dominic and I have worked together over the last 2 years as well. So I continue to work with them. Obviously, we as a community do better when we're all playing together and working together for everyone. And so that will be my goal, and I'm sure the city will have the same goal.
Awesome. I just want to bring that out so people know that we're still working together. So thank you for your leadership.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for your update. I especially want to highlight the Homebound program that you're doing. Thank you for doing that. I think there are many people that really are having a challenging time getting out and perhaps getting their booster. So I appreciate that information and your efforts there to really reach out.
Perfect. And if I could just add one more thing to that, we are offering you can get your first dose through the Homebound Project, or any of the 3 vaccines are available, including the newly finalized approved Moderna vaccine, which I forget the new name for it, but Pfizer and Moderna are now fully approved, and the Homebound team has access to all of those.
Thank you for your cooperation
You're
and
welcome.
partnership.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you
Thank
for all your work.
Thank you much.
Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, our next item on the agenda, what that is item 3, a discussion regarding Super Bowl watch party at Paul Brown Stadium. We have Jeff Aludo down. He's going to do an introduction, if that's okay. You brought the item forward. Can you give an introduction first? Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. So we had a discussion last week about the idea of a watch party at PBS for the AFC Championship game. Obviously, that was before the game when we had it. So as I indicated then, my conversations with board offices, it was going to be difficult to pull together on a couple of days' notice, given some of the logistics associated with an event like that, in a way that would be able to guarantee that we could guarantee a safe and fun event for fans who would be coming to the stadium. So thankfully, as we just discussed earlier on in our first agenda item, the Bengals won. So we now have a bit more time to plan for and pull together an event for the Super Bowl. So I'm glad the item was scheduled today so we could discuss through some items. And I just want to make sure that from the administration's perspective that we continue to move in accordance with board direction on this. So I've been in touch with our partners from the city of Cincinnati to the Cincinnati Bengals to other organizations, whether it's the Chamber, the CVB, 3CDC, others who might coordinate other events ancillary to an event at Paul Brown Stadium. I'm happy to report that all of our partners that I've mentioned, and others have been extremely cooperative. They've all been great, want to help us pull this off. So we've got multiple staff working on all the operational logistics associated with this event. So everything from ticketing and access to important issues like security, make sure this obviously want this to be a safe event. We normally contract with private security, and we have the sheriff and CPD anytime we open up the stadium. So we want to ensure, obviously need to ensure concessions availability, video capability. We have to there is a process we also have to go through in terms of ensuring NFL approval for the watch party as well. So we have all those wheels in motion. We're proceeding with analysis of each of them. Based upon my conversations with the board, with different board offices, I think what we are looking at this point is an event that would be focused in the bowl itself. There's been some different ideas that have been out there we've heard about in the community, but we're proceeding as if we are looking at an event in the bowl as opposed to something that would say be focused or concentrated in one of the club lounges per se. But we would still obviously look to coordinate this event with other things going on outside of the stadium. So we know there's going to be watch parties or events going on in Fountain Square. We know that there's going to be tailgating going on, the Chambers tailgating event out on Freedom Way. So we want to make sure that we coordinate this as a package of events going on that day. And as Commissioner Reese has mentioned, a lot of things going on just that entire weekend. So we talked with some partners earlier this morning about making sure that we're coordinating this from an event perspective on the entire weekend. Obviously, the bowl brings with it the ability to have additional capacity. We have more people that can attend. All of the items I mentioned earlier, from concessions to security, et cetera, there is a cost to those, and so there is an additional cost that will come with a bigger event. But we're working through all those logistics right now. So we want to make sure, and we're working with our vendors to ensure that we've got staffing, that we can make sure all these things are adequately staffed, from concessions to security, et cetera. Literally have staff working full time right now on making sure we can get all these questions answered over the next couple of days, because I would like by the end of this week or very early next week to announce the ticketing methodology for people, so that people can know how to get online and where they go for ticketing, et cetera, so they can reserve a seat to the event. We had talked about it being an open event. At the same time, we really feel that we need some method of access control and ticketing, et cetera, just so we have an idea of how many people to expect, but also to make sure that people who sign up that they want to come as well. So I think when you do have advanced ticketing, that helps with that as well. So again, purpose of the discussion today is just to give you some background on what we're looking into right now and how we're proceeding with this, and to make sure that we're moving in accordance with the board's policy direction, because we've not really had a concerted board discussion about the way that we're moving forward on this. And I just want to make sure that we're doing that in a direction that meets with board approval. So with that, Madam President, I'll throw it back to you. Happy to answer any questions or go into further detail on any items.
Thank you for that summary, Vice President Reese.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Administrator Aludo. If you don't mind, Madam President, I just wanted to kind of give the vision, and then we might have a couple questions. So last week I brought this idea. It came from a taxpayer fan, said, why can't we have a watch party in Paul Brown Stadium? I thought it was a fantastic idea. I still think it's a fantastic idea. I brought it forward, and I knew that I was told that the administration, we couldn't pull it off for the AFC Championship. I'm always looking for ways in which we can keep the dollars at home or bring additional dollars at home. Coming from a background of tourism as the former deputy director of Ohio Tourism, and as someone who put together in Hamilton County at a time when our occupancy of hotels was very, very low. We had the lowest in the country. I was the vice mayor at that time, and people said, well, you got a crazy idea. I said, let's bring everybody together. We had a game at a game at Paul Brown Stadium, UC versus Ohio State. For your football fans, you remember that. We had a game, the last game at the Riverfront Stadium with the Reds. Our occupancy rate was low. People were boycotting and not coming here. And we weren't talking to each other. I called up Dean Gregory at Montgomery and said, can I get in there for a meeting? And I brought people from the arts, people from the sports, people from professional college sports. I brought people from the chamber. I said, listen, let's come together and have what I call the red hot weekend. We're going to put a whole weekend together. We're going to book all these hotel rooms. We're going to bring people downtown Cincinnati. And so they had never worked together because we had silos. And they came together, and I was at the city, and we had I think Commissioner Batum may have been around then from the county. And we came together. We had Red Hot Weekend, brought 500,000 people to downtown Cincinnati when it was a ghost town. And we booked every single room, and everybody was happy. I said, man, if we work together, we can do this. And that is what created these activations and what they call mega weekends. Now, fast forward, this idea came to me, and I've never had an idea like this come and have, so many people call it like, hey, don't do it. We can't do it. Why can't we do it? This is the Super Bowl. And yeah, we haven't been used to it. We have not been used to it. Our county, our city has not been used to it. But we invested in stadiums, the taxpayers did. They invested so that we could have teams to bring this moment. We want to win Super Bowls. We want to win World Series. We want to be on the big stage. And so we've got a great opportunity, and even a bigger opportunity now, because last week I said, we're going to win the Super Bowl, and we're going to go to the Super Bowl, and we're going now. And so we want to have something where we get a return on our investment. Now, California, they didn't invest in our stadium here, the taxpayers of California. So we go to California, we're not getting a dime out of California. So what we're looking at is, how do we do something where we give back to the fans, to the taxpayers? Yesterday was the deadline for property taxes, and people were running down here. And thanks to our commission, you got a 30% break. But the reality is, for years, you've been paying for this. So how can we now allow you to be a part of this? And so I put on my tourism hat. I put on my sales hat, because I'm always about how do we sell our county? How do we sell our city? And that's what I do. And I said, wow, we could be the unofficial Super Bowl. Okay, everybody can't afford to go to California. They sent me a package, $10,000. I ain't got no $10,000. And that didn't even get me in the game. Hotel and some parties they want me to go to. I said, wait a minute, how can we do that here? Our hotel occupancy is low because of conventions are down. They are not having conventions. We're almost at that area where we were with the Red Hot Weekend. So now we can have a whole weekend where you can have the tourism experience of our county and our city. We can put a package together that gets you here on Thursday and you leave on Monday. It's Valentine's weekend. It's people looking for something to do. So we can have people driving here. If you can't afford California, you can come here. And you can come here, you can enjoy all of the festivities that our entities are putting on, the chamber, the 3CDC, all these different activities should be going all week. And then the watch party inside the publicly funded Paul Brown Stadium. And as the administrator said, it wouldn't be everybody just a free-for-all. You would have to, register, get maybe a $5 ticket, and the money goes to the Free Store Food Bank. And then you have the tailgating outside, and then you got all of this going on. And when they cut nationally to LA, they show LA, and they cut back to us, they say, oh man, look at Cincinnati, look at Hamilton County. And so I'm supportive of this watch party. I think it's a great idea. I think it's positive. I don't think this is a negative. This is a positive. And we've been waiting 31 years. So yeah, we don't know how to do it because we've never done it. And they're comparing this. I was watching the national news, Madam President, Commissioner Driehaus, they're comparing Joe Burrow, who's from Athens, Ohio, to LeBron James from Akron, Ohio, when LeBron James won the championship in Cleveland. And in Cleveland, they was inside the arena and they were outside the arena and they had all kind of stuff going on in Cleveland. And now we've got Joe Burrow, Heisman Trophy winner from Ohio. And I just think we have done a great job with what we have. We have a great opening day parade, but this is the Super Bowl. We've had great Doras, but this is the Super Bowl. How do we do those things, but do it on steroids? I think the parade, if it was up to me, it's not up to me, but I'm gonna put it out here from a tourism perspective. The parade should go almost all through Hamilton County. Largest parade ever, and all of the police departments can be a part of it. All the fire departments can be a part of it, because this is a county-wide and county-owned facility, and we're all a part of it. I love our coach, Coach Taylor. Madam President, when, after the game and everything, I was excited, and then I got, a little tired. I got a text at 12 midnight saying, "Where are you at?" Coach Taylor he's out at game time. And he's at giving the ball to the first African-American bar and restaurant. And I'm like, man, and Coach Taylor not tired. How in the world I'm tired? I didn't play no game. I wasn't on the field. And what I love about them, they're getting the ball all around the county so that everybody's a part of this. So the vision is that we create this unofficial Super Bowl weekend where everybody is involved. But the big thing would be our watch party at Paul Brown Stadium. Now, let me say this. We have game days with 60,000 fans. When we played Las Vegas, we had 60,000 plus fans sold out. So everybody couldn't get in. And then I was at a local bar and restaurant, and that place was packed. In the convention business, the more people you bring, the more businesses get business. The less people you bring, the less businesses get business. So I'm hopeful that we can pull this off. I don't know, and I just want the people to know if we don't, it ain't because I didn't try. But I think we should be putting our focus more on we can do it. And just don't think so small. That's why it's called the Super Bowl. We're not doing what we already do. We do a good job with that. We should be thinking big. And I'm inspired by this Bengals team. We were, it's a why not us? It's get rid of that. It is us. It is us. And Joe Burrow said, get used to this, because we're going big time and we're going to do big time things. And our board has been involved in trying to do some things different and do it big time. And I just hope the city and the county and everybody come together, the region. I even saw the team when they were leaving. They had some sheriffs from another county taking them out. So we got to bring all of the police and sheriff and fire from the whole region. I'm just excited about this. And I thank you, Mr. Administrator, for looking into this. I guess my question would be, we got to get a timeline of when we would make a decision, or, when will we have to make a decision? Because I know when we get out of here, everybody's going to be asking that. When would be the timeline of when you pull all the pieces together and talk to the people and all that?
So we're going to be talking to people nonstop as this goes on. So I can't give you here's when we're going to do this and here's when we're going to do that. I mean, this is something that we're going to be working on continually. And we'll be checking in each and every day on this at the end of the day to see where we are. Each of the logistical items I mentioned are things that are important to pulling an event like this off. As you said, Madam Vice President, we do game days all the time. So we know the pieces that have to be put into place. It's just a matter of securing those for this specific event. So again, I think what we want to make happen is to ensure that we can have a fun, memorable, safe event for people. So that means a couple of major pillars that we have to make sure are in place. Number one, we have to make sure that there's a ticketing and access system, which we're working on right now. We have to make sure that there is adequate security staff. We have to make sure concessions are available. We have to make sure when people get in that that they can actually see the game, right? I mean, that's what everyone's coming in for. And so once we can get those major pillars addressed, I'm hoping that by the end of the week, we'll be in a position, and I should have mentioned, and obviously we have to get NFL approval for the party as well. But once we get all those things addressed, then I'm hoping by the end of this week, we'd be in a position at the very latest early next week where we could say to the general public, this is where you go. this is where you go for tickets. This is how you this is how you go about accessing the tickets. And this is what you can expect when you get into the stadium. So I wish I could give you a tomorrow or the next day, but we're going to be pulling these things together on a day-by-day basis just to make sure that we can host the event as I'm sure the board wants it to be hosted.
Madam President. Oh, I'm sorry. And I just wanted to add, if we can get some kind of, some kind of timeline, because we have to know we can do it or we're not able to do it. But I do want to add that we do invest a lot of money, not just on the stadium itself, but we help with game day operations, that we help reimburse funding for that. We've put $2 million in tourism, and we've got some more money set aside for possible tourism. We own the parking garages, and certainly we don't want them sitting there empty because we got debt on them. And I do want to add that we will need security no matter what. It's better to have organized events to have security than an unorganized celebration. This idea has come from the people, and the people are ready. And I just thought it'd be great to have an organized activity for the people. I know that on Sunday, people were out and they were driving, they were doing, it was, there was no organized affair for that. And we've seen in other cities that the people don't wait for an organized thing. They coming out to celebrate whether we're organized or not. So I think this gives us a chance to be organized and be prepared. And to me, that helps safety rather than unorganized activity and everybody just do their own thing. So I just wanted to put that out there, Madam President, because we do spend a lot of investment in tourism and a lot of investment in public facilities. And I just think that's why we invest in them for times like this. We haven't done it in 31 years. I think we should act like it's been 31 years. Let's do it. So I would like to, hopefully get some kind of time of when we could have some type of, at least, answer if it can be done or if it can't be done.
Madam
And I think
President,
that would help.
I think one of the bottom lines is we have not spoken publicly about this issue, and to come to some consensus on the board of where we are with the issue. Certainly you can continue forth on what you're doing logistically, but I want to hear from everyone as far as where they are on this issue. So Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you, Madam President. So I too am very excited about the opportunity to celebrate the win in a couple weeks when we win the Super Bowl. And so I have a little different perspective on this, only because I have some questions that I just don't have answers to right now. So the first thing is the collaboration with the city, with the folks on the banks, with the restaurateurs, with the CVB, the Chamber of Commerce, are very important as we, as a community, figure out how we can celebrate the Super Bowl both before and after the event and on the day of. So I'm very interested to know what else is going on, where it's happening, and how what we are doing kind of dovetails into what everybody else is doing as part of a coordinated effort. So the stadium potentially is part of that. But I think there is so much energy behind the game that I know there are many things that have been planned or are being planned. And so I do want to take some of that into account to make sure that we're working in collaboration with all the other events that are happening as a partner down on the banks. But specifically, I just have a couple questions about, and just to dig in a little bit about, Jeff, about some of the things that you mentioned. So I would be interested to know related to cost, what we're looking at. I know there are a lot of, I used to work at the Red Stadium in food service, and I'm familiar with the vendors and what kind of effort it takes to get all that up and running. Now I know it can be done. It's just a matter of can we do it for this, and what is eventually the expense of that, in addition to the security. Can we get security secured for the event? I know none of us want to have an event where we don't have adequate security in place for that event. So I'll be interested to know if that can be put in place. And then I'm also interested in, and we haven't talked about this at all, the interest in doing it, right? And not for us so much as for the fan base in going down to a watch party in the stadium, I too have heard from constituents, and I asked Gina Marsh, my chief of staff, to try to pull together because I wasn't keeping that close a track of them. But I've had some emails and phone calls related to this as it has been discussed publicly on some of the media stations. And from my office, I've had a few calls for this. I've had a few calls not for this. I've had some emails in both directions too. So I think the community is, some are interested in doing this and some, are more concerned about it really and the cost of putting it together, or really just disinterested perhaps. I did hear from a business owner who he runs a bar out in kind of the Dent Cleves area. And he had some concern about, and Commissioner Reese, you mentioned this, about the bars, not so much the bars downtown suffering, because obviously they will see all the people coming here. It's the bars outside the city that are concerned about not having the fans in those facilities. I just raised that because it was raised to me. I did talk to the gentleman and trying to get a better understanding of his worry about that. But to the point, I personally don't have a good gauge of interest, given what my office has heard and given what I've heard moving around the community. So I wonder if there is a mechanism that we can put in place related to that, to say, if we are going to move forward on an event that is of this scale, and as you said, it would be huge. We've never done something like this before. We do want to make sure that we're doing it and people will come. And I don't have a very clear understanding of what the level of interest is in actually participating in going down to this event. So is there a way to gauge that interest? Maybe as we think about ticketing, and I guess the Bengals would do the ticketing for the.
We are talking with the Bengals about that. I've talked with staff internally that we are preparing for either that prospect of the Bengals assisting us with the ticketing or working the ticketing through a third-party ticket vendor on our own, just depending upon what the Bengals capabilities are. We want to remain cognizant that they have some work ahead of them already in terms of selling tickets for the Super Bowl, et cetera. But we are talking with them about that. And so I think we have a couple of different plans in that regard. If they can assist us, fantastic. If not, we can go a different route.
Okay, so, and I guess regardless, is there a way to gauge interest prior to the final decision being made? Because I hear you saying we're a few days out from that. Is there something like a pre-registration we could do to say to folks in the community, if you're interested in doing this and you think it's a great idea and you would go, please let us know that. Pre-register for the event. Tickets aren't yet available, but we need to gauge interest as to whether or not, is this going to be, 1,000 people or 50,000 people? I mean, these are the kinds of things we really need to know, not only for interest sake, but also security sake, vendors, all the rest of it. Because without that information, we really don't have a sense of how many people will be going down, nor do we know how to prepare for it. So I don't know if there's something like that we can do within the next, it would have to happen fairly quickly, but some way to gauge what we're looking at here and what we need to have in place, depending on the kind of crowd that's interested in going. So that is just something that I've been thinking through. I've heard from others, what kind of crowd do you anticipate? I just have no idea. And so that's something I think we should probably have some kind of sense of before we think through the amount of security and all the rest of it that needs to be in place. Those are
Thank you.
those are my offhand
Initial,
comments at the moment.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I heard Commissioner Dreehouse asked about cost, and I didn't hear a number. I know it's probably fluid, but.
I'm sorry, and I
Cost.
didn't provide an answer to that.
No.
So we don't have a firm cost estimate
Sure.
for what it would cost for the watch party. I can tell you on a typical game day, costs that are paid on everything from security to cleaning, to police, to scoreboards, maintenance, all that, everything together typically runs between $250,000, $270,000. And that's empirical from games this year. Assuming we are not talking, and I don't know, but assuming we're talking about a population in the stadium of less than that, some of these costs are going to be highly volume based, some are not. So I would anticipate a cost less than that. I would
Mhm.
say, anywhere from half to 2/3 of that number.
Mhm.
But again, that some of that gets back to Commissioner Dreehouse's question about what type of crowd to expect. But I would say we would not be talking over that. Certainly, it would be something under that number.
Thank you.
Madam President.
And so I have several
Oh, go ahead.
comments. Yeah. So, and I also heard you earlier say that staff has been working full-time on this, which I'm a little confused about because there has not really been a consensus on where we are. And so when we talk about staff working full-time on this project, I know it didn't stop them from doing other things like rental assistance and things like that. So not for you to answer necessarily, but I think we kind of put the cart before the horse. And I'm not saying I'm not for this, but I have a couple other comments. It was brought up earlier about the playoff balls going out outside of the city of Cincinnati. And I made it very well known that Cincinnati is in Hamilton County and we need to go out and we need to go to a diverse group and they are doing it. I think Dale High, Mount Lookout, Mount Healthy. So I'm really happy to see that. Now, as far as my support of the Bengals, there's no question how much I support them. My dad spent his whole life working for the Bengals, and we've always been Bengal fans. But for some reason, the word COVID didn't come up at all in our discussion. It's like the elephant in the room. The numbers are down, and that's great. We don't know the result, as I was telling Greg about the people that were at Kansas City and when they come back and if the numbers go up. I represent all citizens, not just the ones that voted for me. Lots of people have not even been to the stadium and they see this as an opportunity to go without having to pay any money, and I understand that. The county is still in a state of emergency. COVID numbers are still too high. We're still having weekly briefings on COVID. That's not gone away. Okay, we can say, well, you're outside. I think we're looking at maybe the lounge instead of being outside possibly. But if there's a decision to open the stadium, in my opinion, people need to show proof of vaccination or that they've tested negative. I believe that we should continue to support our small businesses, and those that don't want to be vaccinated can go to those small businesses around here or in the outskirts of Cincinnati, and hopefully they'll wear their masks. Now, I don't want to say that, and I don't want to be the one to say that the county is sponsoring an event with the numbers that we have as relates to COVID. If the NFL has a game in a stadium, that's something different. But if we're sponsoring this gathering, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. I know as we talked about the Bengals, statement came out on WLWT News. The Bengals front office said there were too many moving parts right now for them to weigh in. NFL input contracts with vendors, security, staff, and all those dots would have to be connected very soon. I'm not saying we can't connect them. I'm not going to necessarily stand in the way, but we cannot forget that COVID is in the air. We don't want to forget it. And I'm not comfortable saying the county who said it was a state of emergency is now saying, come on, everybody, come together. Be it in a lounge, you said may hold like 700 people or something, you were saying?
The club lounge, I think,
Yeah.
holds around 700, the
Okay.
East Club Lounge.
And
I
even
believe.
if we're in the stadium, so like I said, those people that maybe were in Kansas City undoubtedly would probably come to the stadium. So those are my comments. So I'm not sold on the idea. I know the taxpayers should be able to come if they choose to. I have gotten emails also about those that are against, and I'll give Leslie what I have, those that are for. So I had a little nice note on my desk when I came in about how can you not do this? And then I got a nice email about please don't do this. So I think, we have the responsibility to, for me to see what's best for the people. And they will have an opportunity to celebrate. But I don't want to authorize as a county that it's okay for all these people to come together. Maybe 200 and maybe 30,000. So those are my comments, Vice President Reese.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. My position stands. I think this is a missed, if we don't do it, I think it's a missed opportunity. And I also think that the investments that we make, we're wasting the investment of the taxpayers. Well, what do I mean by that? In the report that we got from administrator, your weekly report, it says that in March, something will come before the board for almost $8 million to put Wi-Fi in Paul Brown Stadium. That would be in March. We didn't have a petition. We didn't weigh in and say, what do the people think? They don't have to send us a petition on it. We don't have to say, I got to gauge and see, do the people want to have Wi-Fi? We didn't do that. We will be putting in Wi-Fi and some scoreboard replacements to the tune of $8 million by the taxpayers, not our individual pockets, but the taxpayers' pockets. That will be in March, just in time for after the Super Bowl. There are a number of other repairs that have to take place at Paul Brown Stadium that will be on the taxpayers' dime, that will be coming forward. We will not need a petition. We will not try to gauge if the people really want to do this or not. We would have to make a decision as a board. Game day operations in the contract, the lease that I got. The contract that is the contract with the people's contract. In here, it says we're supposed to get so many county days, so many special event days, and we haven't really instituted it. And I think those are missed opportunities. But also, we also pay for reimburse game day operations. Now, no, I don't remember anybody bringing before me or the board saying we need to get a petition. We need to get some emails. We need to gauge and see if the people want to pay for these reimbursement of game day operations. My point to all of that is to say that my comments in bringing this here is twofold. One is for the taxpayers who want to come, who want to be a part of this, who have paid for this facility, and they should be able to participate. They can't afford California, too expensive. $10,000, $6,000 to sit up at the rafters. Can't afford it. And they've been waiting a long time for a moment like this. Number two is while we have that, let's think of a way to bring some outside dollars in. We still gave Tourism Convention Visitors Bureau $2 million to do some advertising. Why advertise if we're not trying to bring people here? No need for $2 million. We got another $2 million sitting that might go to them. There's no need to advertise people coming here if we're saying that we're not going to be able to accommodate them. So I just thought this was a great idea. It didn't come from maybe the typical channels that we hear from, but it came from a fan, it came from a taxpayer. I think it's a great idea. I think that we have had experiences where we've had game days and small businesses still were open. We've sold out our stadium on game days and bars and restaurants were still around, still open. I got calls. I didn't even talk about my calls. I mean, we overloaded with calls. People wanting to book rooms, tell me when. People talking about coming from Chicago. People talking about coming from Dayton, Columbus. They're ready to, book a weekend. And I think it's a great opportunity. I've also heard from someone with the Food Truck Association. So they're getting killed out here. They want to be a part of it. Please let us know. We want to be a part of this. Security will be necessary whether we have this event or not, because there will be other activities or people will make their own activities. And so I would hope that there should be a regional conversation about security anyway, regional. Every security group in a police department, fire department in Hamilton County should be prepared, ready to go with a plan. So I hope that they are doing that. And I did reach out to the city and the mayor. I've reached out as much as I can to folks about this issue. So I want to put that on the table. I don't want people to look like, oh my God, what's the cost? We got an $8 million responsibility getting ready to hit us in March for Wi-Fi. We've got a new capital improvements that we've got to do to that stadium. We've got these garages that we put a debt on the people and we ain't paid the garages off. I need somebody parking in them. We've got hotels that we're talking about building. I got to bring some people to town and get them in these rooms. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and what I've heard. And I want to be clear, this came from the people, and I'm sure, I mean, it's all over social media, everywhere people want to go. Now, I want to be clear, everybody don't like football. Some people don't go, so they might say, I don't want it because they don't even watch football. I love basketball. Some people don't watch basketball. So you're not going to get 100% of everybody, but 100% of everybody is paying for this thing, whether they want to or not. And they just dropped some checks off to the treasurer's office because the deadline was on Monday. So this is a give back to the taxpayers. This is a give back to the fans. This is a bring money in from out of town. If you can't go to California, come here. This is a way for us to come together, and it's a positive. And don't want it to turn into a negative because it's a positive. And I'm going to keep that positive attitude. Joe Burrow, they sacked him 9 times and he kept getting back up. That's my kind of guy. Kick us down 9 times. And he said, we still can do it. So I'm going to stay positive. I love to get all the facts back. And I want to thank you for putting it on the agenda today, because I know we've got a very expansive agenda. And I want to thank you, Madam President, for putting it on the agenda. And each of us have the right to say where we are. So the people watching know where we are. The taxpayers know where we are. The fans know where we are. And I'm very comfortable in my position of saying that we should move forward with a watch party. And each of the commissioners have their right to say whether or not they're for it or they're against this particular model. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity and bringing this forward, Madam President, in a short time so that everyone can at least get the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any additional comments?
I do. So I just want to say that I did indicate last week that I was in favor of the administration looking into this idea. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just want to get a better understanding of whether or not people will participate and how much it's going to cost to do it, and whether or not we're going to have adequate security and vendors and all the rest of it. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea necessarily. I just want more information. And I believe I said that last week. I do want to draw a distinction though. So we are investing always, the taxpayers are investing always in the stadiums. That's been going on for 20 years. And we have an obligation through contracts to do things like, maintenance and improvements that we're obligated to do under the agreements with the Bengals. This is not one of those items. I mean, to throw a watch party is something that's outside of that. Not saying that's good or bad necessarily, but we do have obligations that we will proceed to invest in because that's what we have to do. This is something different. I think asking how much it's going to cost is a legitimate question. I just want to get a sense of how many folks will participate. I do think, there's so much going on the banks and in the Dora right outside the stadium. So again, I want to make sure that these things are all folding into each other and the energy from one plays off the energy of the other. And so I'm simply asking questions about something that we are being asked to contemplate. And I just need to get more information before I can make an educated decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda. Let's see, need my glasses. Item 4, Emergency Relief Rent and Utility Assistance Program. Michael Patton, Director of JFS. Welcome, Director.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to give a quick update on where things stand at JFS with respect to the Emergency Rent and Utility Assistance Program. Okay, most of you know, but for those of you who don't know, Job and Family Services, one of the organizations locally who is responsible for administering Rent and Utility Assistance Program. The other organization is the Community Action Agency. The good news is, speak up a little bit.
more. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
The good news is that we are well ahead of schedule with respect to the backlog that we have in the applications. The number of applications submitted through ERAP over the last year and a half have been significant. And so we understand that there is a high need in the community, and we have been working diligently through our efforts with 513 relief and also internal staff administering this program through our OMJ office to make sure that the citizens who apply receive the funding that they need to handle and take care of any rent utility assistance that they have underway. Through Friday, so this is the most updated information that I have, we have been able to serve 5,555 households in Hamilton County. And we have approved over $20 million in funds through the ERAP program. Related to our plan to address the backlog, it says we currently face a backlog. We actually faced a backlog as of January 12th of 2,700 applications. At that time, we put in a 60-day plan to make sure that we were able to address the existing backlog in a timely and effective way. Through the 31st, we have reduced that backlog to 1,659 applications. So we've made substantial progress over the last 2.5 weeks or so by dedicating some additional resources to make sure that we have hands and eyes on these applications and that they're being processed. Some things that we've done to make sure that that backlog is coming down. We have new data and reporting tools to manage the workflow. Staff reallocated within OMJ. So we had some staff that were not working specifically on this project that we shifted over to help support this initiative in the way that they could, to make sure that the folks that were determining eligibility, making phone calls, collecting verification, finally making approvals on the applications could focus on that task at hand. So we moved some resources around within OMJ to make sure that that happened. We also created and filled positions at a higher pay range, which gave us a little bit more flexibility in terms of utilization and also just the amount of time that could be dedicated to working these applications on an ongoing basis. And other things, including staff incentives to increase productivity. For example, working from home remotely full-time, which also gives an opportunity to focus specifically on the applications. This process is almost fully electronic, but we have an opportunity and the ability to do this in a lot of cases in a remote setting from home, where we can look at the applications online, we can look at the verifications online, we can make phone calls, we can reach out to vendors and people who are looking to have the applications processed in a timely way. And so we've done that as well. The most recent success I want to point out, again, this is through Friday, is that we've approved 1,042 claims. And just want to point out that claims are different than applications, because an application can have multiple claims. You can have a claim for rent and utilities within the same application. So we processed and approved 1,042 claims with a total payment amount of $2.4 million. That's the largest amount we've issued in a week since we started administering the program. So I'm excited about that progress, and I'm hopeful that we can continue that progress going forward so that we can reduce the backlog down to zero. And then finally, on this page, staff continue to prioritize oldest applications first to prevent evictions. And this is really the nuts and bolts of where I expect us to be in the next 6 weeks, which will be approximately early March 12th. As I mentioned earlier, already we've been able to decrease the backlog from 2,700 to 1,626, a little over 1,000 applications reduction in that time. At this moment, we're processing applications received on December the 8th. We know that that's a problem, and we need to get those applications within a 10-day time frame. Our goal is by March that we will be able to process applications that we get and be making decisions and working in those applications within a 10-day time frame. So at the end of the conclusion of the 60-day plan, that's our goal. And then right now, based on where we've been and what our progress is currently, we're ahead of schedule with that. So I expect us to be able to get through the remainder of the backlog within the 60-day period, probably in an earlier time frame than we anticipate. So early March is my target, and I'm hopeful that we can get there. Staff have been working incredibly hard to make sure that they have an opportunity to work on this and focus on this backlog so that we can get it down to zero and start taking on new applications as they come in a timely way. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have about it.
Thank you, Director Patton. One question I have, when they fill out the application for assistance, is there a box on there that says like, how did you hear about this service?
I don't have the answer to that
Okay.
question, but I do not believe that is there, but I can certainly follow up with you. We'll follow up with you and get that answer.
Yeah, that would be great because I'm just wondering, how are people finding out about this? This is a great report and that you guys are moving quickly. But how do we make sure that more people even know about it? I mean, I get questioned all the time, do you guys help with rent? And I'm thinking, I was thinking, oh God, we're not, so I don't even know if we even want to consider a television commercial or something that costs money, we know, but the people we would impact and come in, because there's so many more that we know nothing about. So thank you so much for your work on this.
Sure, thank you. And I'll get that answer to you.
Sure. Vice President Reese.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, I think, Madam President, you raised a good point. We did some advertising with our partners. We had put some funding and that allowed us to do the marketing. And one of the things I had raised to the administrator, how do we keep something like that going? Because that was 2021 and it's 2022 now. But we do have some dollars and maybe we can get a report, Madam President, of what we're doing on marketing. I think we utilize some experts in that Regina Russo's company and some other companies. I think we got to do, we stepped out larger than we usually do. We were spending like, I don't know, $500, $1,500. That didn't work. But these programs are great, but if no one, well, I won't say no one, but we want more people to know about it. So I totally agree. And we had billboards and those kind of things. I think we should look at keeping that going, whether it's through Ms. Russo's company or who's a female-owned company. She did a great job. But we had some, I think we got some dollar amounts, but I don't know if we've started that marketing process. So definitely support that as what you just said. The other thing, Director Patton, on here, I know it has rental assistance, but we got the home ownership piece that we've added. And is that part of the 60-day plan too, because people can apply either for rental or for home ownership?
Yeah, all of those applications are included. I do have some separate numbers for mortgage, just if you're interested. The mortgage funds issued to date are $290,691. And we have served 104 families for that so far. So those applications started to come in a little bit later, so they would be in the later application pool, but we'll certainly make sure that we're addressing those as equally as we can as they come in.
Yeah, I think that's the one that needs some advertising because we didn't have any advertising going when we rolled this one out. We had a press conference, but people consume their information different ways. So I think adding them with whatever we were doing with rental, because we were reaching them in a lot of different ways, whether it was a billboard, whether it was social media, whether it was a text message, Twitter, I mean, it was everywhere, radio. And so I think it's 400 is good. I mean, 104 is good, but we could have a larger number because we turned away a lot of people early on with the 513 relief bus because we didn't
Before it
have the
started.
family one. And now we need to let people know we do have something for home ownership. Also, when you talk about this, first of all, let me just say that thank you. I want to step back and say thank you. These numbers, one of the things I said, we need a 60-day plan. You step right in, shifted folks, resources, whatever. We've cut this down and almost less than half. I think, again, like I said, if we could get to that 0 so we can, pull in new people would be great. But I think looking at this, we're on the right track. There was a question that a lot of people were in what they call, I guess, what you call the waiting room. So I guess if you help us with the steps, someone fills out an application, whether online, whether it's at the bus, whether it's, wherever. Then what is the waiting room? Because for me, backlog is from beginning to you off our books. And I was listening to, we were talking to administrator, and I think it was a difference in what we mean by backlog. For me, backlog is for the time you come in, you off our books. But they were saying that it may not include the people in a waiting room. In other words, you fill it out, but you're waiting on their information. And that's a little tough because we're creating email addresses to people who don't use really email. And I don't know if we have a text messaging system, which is something that I had advocated for, that we have a text message. Most people do text messaging versus email now. Have we corrected that, or how are we dealing with that waiting? And I guess the waiting room is you're waiting for additional paperwork.
Correct. So there are currently 1,141 cases that fall into that category where they've made an application. We are aware of the application. We review the application. We're in need of some additional verification. I do not have the text. I do not believe we have the text option. I do know we spend a lot of time making phone calls based on the information we get through the electronic application and obviously the email address. There are some that are less responsive to email, more responsive to the phone calls. That is included in the process of trying to make sure that we get everything we need to approve the application. And so the waiting room I think you're referring to are the applications where we've touched it, we've seen it, we know about it, we're waiting on, we've processed it, and we're waiting on additional verification. So we're making phone calls now. That's a part of that process in the backlog is where the applications sit, the status that they're in, and the staff person is making a decision at that moment in time about the best way to try to reach out and make contact with the applicant so that we can resolve that pending application.
If we could look, Director Patton, if we could look into that text messaging, I think that's something that our board, when we were looking at our overall budget, I said, let's look into that. And they said we would have enough in your budget to look at that.
Okay.
Because we have had a situation with these cell phone companies now, when we call, it's coming up as scam. And we also have concurrently a campaign warning people against fraud, right? So, every time you look up, I get it on my phone and it was my office calling and it's a scam. I said, what in the world? So we did recognize that that is an issue, but if you text someone, they're more likely to get back. We had heard from people calling us, said, hey, nobody called us. And then when we talked to Mr. Holt, you guys were trying to reach him. And they said, oh, it must have been that scam that popped up. So if we could get that, that might help us with getting people out of this waiting room, because some people don't know they're in the waiting room. They think that they are, they filled it out. They think they're being processed. So anyway, those are my points. But I want to thank you. You hit the ground running on this. And I feel we're heading in the right direction on it with the backlog, because a lot of people have been calling about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Reese.
Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you, Director, for being here. I appreciate the update. I too am getting phone calls about the backlog and people not getting responses related to their assistance. Can you, I don't know if you said this, not maybe I missed it. What is the trajectory of the amount of calls that you're getting? In other words, are you still getting the same volume now that you were getting a month ago or 2 weeks ago? And what can you take away from the trajectory of the calls coming in for assistance?
Commissioner Dreehouse, I don't have that information today, but I can certainly talk to the team and find out exactly what the call volume is like now compared to what it was before. And I agree. I think that would give us some indication of the urgency around the applications. If you're getting calls, if the commissioners are getting calls, I'm sure we're also getting calls about the status of the application and what we're doing to process that. So I will follow up and get you that information.
Thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate the emphasis you're putting on trying to reduce the backlog. Obviously, you're getting that done. The other thing is, as we move through this program, you, I think, indicated that 20 million or so has been spent in assistance. I think we allocated 36 or so. I don't remember the total amount. But as we move through these, and this is the point that I'm trying to make also with the volume of calls you're getting, we don't know if this is going to be a long-term issue for folks related to coming out of COVID here. I know that we're not out, potentially coming out perhaps. But I think we all would want to be informed if you find that the volume is where it used to be, and we're going to need to allocate additional dollars for this program. So just want to
Certainly.
make sure that I think all three of us would want to be kept up to date as to how that's going. And again, what you're seeing by way of the volume of calls.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And just finally, I looked at your first sheet and through January the 31st of this year, 5,555 households served. And it just really tells me these are families that are now not on the street now. So we kind of glaze over those numbers because we asked for them. But your staff and you should feel very well, and also our commission. But I'm just thinking about these people. Numbers are people, like Greg was saying, and that are not on the street. So thank you all for all that you do.
Thank you guys very
Okay.
much.
Madam
Thanks.
President?
Yes.
If I could just very briefly, I think Vice President Reese had asked a question about marketing. And we do have a new $50,000 contract for marketing with a vendor, so we can get information on that out to the whole board, just so you know who the vendor is and the timeline, that type of thing.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll move forward to our next agenda item, was this impervious surface fee. Hello, how are you?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Huh? Okay. Yeah,
MSD. So thank you so much for adding this to the agenda today. We're here with MSD to provide an update on the impervious surface fee work that's been taking place over the past couple of years. So there's going to be a few of us presenting today. We're going to go through the overview at a really fast clip to make sure we have time for MSD to present their findings so far. So we're here today, like I said, with MSD to provide the first of a few presentations on our work related to a potential impervious surface fee. Just as quick background for those watching, back in 2016, the Board of County Commissioners at the time authorized a rate affordability task force in order to help identify ways to address affordability of sewer rates and to recommend ways to improve both affordability and equity on their rate structure. Many of the recommendations have already been implemented thanks to the board's actions, and a few are still in the works or have been researched. So the one that we're looking at right now, as you can see, that came out of the rate affordability task force was this idea of an impervious surface fee. So with that, fast forward a few years, in the fall of 2019, the board passed a resolution directing the administration, and it created a task force to look at an impervious surface fee and bring forward recommendations to the board for their consideration. This included both representatives from different agencies across the county, different stormwater district agencies that currently may have a stormwater fee, as well as a stakeholder group that the board authorized in their resolution. The work to date has been focused in two areas. The first, which you'll hear about today, is an enhanced MSD rate structure that could include a wet weather impervious surface charge. The second focus area, which is a little broader and longer term, is countywide collaboration on stormwater delivery. So an update on the second focus area will be coming at a later date. But today, focus area one, we have as a group realized is the most immediate path forward to address the main intent of the board's October 24th resolution. So again, MSD is here today to provide that update. Prior to that though, Karen Ball, many of you know Karen, is here just to give a quick primer for those watching on what exactly is an impervious surface fee. And then we'll turn it over to MSD for their presentation and look forward to hearing from the board on their feedback and what questions to come back at a future presentation, most likely next week. So with that, I'll introduce Karen Ball.
thank you.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Commissioners. Yes, I'm here. For those who may not be aware of what exactly an impervious surface fee is, frankly, it is largely on every parcel in some configuration, whether it be the rooftop or their driveway. Some have parking lots that are only parking lots. Impervious surface is a contributing factor to flows to the MSD service system. When rain events occur, the rain hits the impervious surface and all surfaces, honestly, and then enters the MSD sewer system, both combined and sanitary. That is what an impervious surface is. An impervious surface fee allows for the collection of fees for the MSD delivery of service based on the impervious surfaceness of each parcel. So if a parcel has more impervious surface, there's more runoff being contributed to the MSD system. And if there's less impervious surface, there's less being contributed to the MSD service, the customer service. So you know, that's pretty much in a nutshell what we're talking about here today. And I am going to introduce, I believe, Mary Lynn Loader, who will be speaking initially on behalf of MSD. She is.
Karen, if I could just ask a question,
sure.
and I looked at the background that Holly went through. And that was one of the recommendations, impervious surface fee.
Correct.
But what was the thought of having an impervious
Okay.
surface fee?
Well, that's a really good question. When the rate affordability task force looked at all options available to us through mechanisms for different rate structures, it was realized by everyone in the then task force, that was Chamber, Help for Seniors, CR Club, KUFA, Legal Aid, all realized that an impervious surface fee, if implemented, could provide a more fair and equitable distribution of the costs associated with treatment of sewage and the flows during rain events, if implemented. And it is largely believed that those with smaller lots, smaller homes will see a smaller bill. And those with larger lots and larger parking areas will see a larger bill because of the contribution that's coming from their actual site.
So I know during
That
that
needs to be
time, though, the budget and the funding was not where it needed to be for our budget. And it was, I'm just going to ask, because when I first came, the thought was this would generate funds. And so I keep hearing, no, it won't.
Well, this is the initial look at the implementation of an impervious surface fee. And what we all decided to do was just start with revenue neutral and just see
Okay.
what that looks like and
Okay.
how things would be broken out. And then we can have conversations, going beyond that at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, MSD used 2021 data, actual data to work through the analysis thus far.
How are you?
Madam President,
Yes.
I just have one
Sure.
question on the PowerPoint. I'm sorry, before you go into there. Because certainly new to me, and I want to thank Holly for meeting with me, trying to bring me up to speed on it. Because I wasn't here in 2019. But on the stakeholder groups, you said selected by the board. You have developers, commercial, industrial interests, the general public. My question is, did you, under general public, would that include small business owners, landlords, and churches, or nonprofits? 'Cause
Through the course of the different group meetings, we've recognized that everyone would benefit from more participation. So we've been open to adding groups and individuals along the way. Currently is no church or school represented, but I believe that we've had conversations about asking them going forward and making sure that they're a part of the conversation.
Okay,
We do, however, have a parking lot owner, large parking lot company represented, and commercial industry represented as well, large
Okay.
and small businesses.
Okay, good. Yeah, I felt like I said nonprofits, churches,
Yeah.
I
I will say that it's been a struggle to get everybody to,
yeah,
to be
I
able to be
understand.
at the meetings,
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
large groups, so.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, commissioners, for having us here. I want to just give you a quick overview of what you have. What we provided was the slides that we're going to go through, as well as this little booklet we put together. And you asked about who was on the committee. Inside the booklet, we actually have a table for all the meetings that MSD hosted and facilitated and who showed up. And, you know, that was on both the agency stakeholder group, the agency group and the stakeholder group. And so you can see who was represented and who we actually met with. And we actually did it all too online, you know, through virtual meetings. So we never actually had an in-person meeting. MSD actually started hosting this back in July of 2021. So we really took our focus, our stakeholder group through a pretty expedited process, just like we're going to kind of take you through a pretty quick, you know, run through of our study and give you a really high level overview of essentially a framework that we've put together from this effort, from the feasibility study. And we are actually planning to come back next Tuesday as well as a follow-up staff meeting to do some deep dives on some of the additional topics or any questions that you have today. I'm going to be joined also by two of our Black and Veatch consultants, Pam Lemoyne and Prabha Kumar. They both have decades of experience working on cost of service studies, rate structures for water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities all over the country. But first, I want to go through again our focus is focus area one. It's specifically focused on really the vision that the board talked about in the resolution that set up the stakeholder groups and the agency groups. We focused really on what was outlined in the board resolution, specifically looking to evaluate the feasibility of implementing the recommendations of the task force. And so today we're going to overlay kind of the major components of the resolution with the objectives of the feasibility study and what we learned through this process and what we kind of came up with as in terms of a framework for going forward if the board chooses to do that. So just a little bit of background on the left-hand side of this slide kind of shows you what our current rate structure is. It's really quite simple. It really boils down to MSD sewerage charges are based on meter size and volume of water used. And all of that rolls up to and comes up with the revenue that we need to pay everything we have to pay to deal with the obligations that we have to deal with. What we're looking at through the impervious surface analysis and the feasibility study of a wet weather charge is to really address or develop a rate structure that is on the right-hand side here. And so what this will do ultimately is breaks out or bifurcates the charges, the costs that we have that are sanitary costs and bifurcate them from wet weather costs. And we're going to go through, again, very high level of how we did that. We can do some additional deep dives. We really took the agency and the stakeholder groups through everything that we are going to go through today, but we're doing it much faster today and going to share with you the outcome. Also, I just want to mention, we use the best available data. We didn't have everything we need, but we wanted to use the best available data that we had and what was most reliable to use for the development of a feasibility study to evaluate a potential change to our rate structure. So this is really the agenda of what we're going to talk about. The discussion, again, is going to be high level. We're our focus was to complete an objective study based on industry standard and recognized practices and use the most readily available information. We did not really have a preconceived notion of what we needed to come up with. You know, we really wanted to take an objective approach. So what we're trying to do is really focus on laying the foundation for improving equity, for improving affordability through an impervious surface basis of part of our charge. So that's kind of what we're trying to do and really, again, improving equity. It's not like we don't have equity in our rates. We do. They are fair, but they could be more fair or they could be more equitable. And that's what this is really about. In terms of how we did this, we're going to talk through, you know, what are MSD wet weather costs, what are our sanitary costs, and then how we use the stakeholders to walk through this and try to, you know, ask the questions, does this make sense based on the foundation or the assumptions that we have built in it? So let's really start with why. So why, you asked Commissioner Reese, why, kind of the drivers are behind this, I think are good to kind of review. So our drivers were, of course, the board resolution, as well as the consent decree and affordability. We have an issue of increased costs associated with aging infrastructure, with increased just cost of service, as well as increased projects that we need to do. So the consent decree is a driver, and again, in trying to ensure that equity. We also wanted to try to look at a holistic solution. We need to make sure that they're cost effective and that they are defensible, and that we also are trying to do something so that there is consistency and uniformity in rates too, because we are an integrated system. Our system is a combined system. We have major interceptors that take wastewater from the northern part of the county down to Guest Street, Mill Creek. And that is, even though it's serving in some cases a sanitary area, it is also conveying and collecting that combined system too. So it's an integrated solution. We have SBUs that happen not only in the combined system, it happens all throughout the system. We have wet weather facilities up in Sharonville or out in Green Township, and various systems all over the district. So we are an integrated system and infrastructure that has both wet weather and sanitary costs. And we're also tried to, one of the drivers was having a variety of stakeholders, a variety of input through this process. But it was really based also on foundational principles. Yes, we had the Board of County Resolution, but we were, also engaged in this process somewhat during the Rate Affordability Task Force and considered this as an option then. So we're really excited that we're here. It's important from a transparency, affordability, equity, and the fact that this really is potentially more of a regional solution for us to consider affordability and addressing some of those challenges that we have. So the context that we have, per the resolution, we're focused on the costs that MSD has currently. So Commissioner Dumas, you asked about, why are we focused on maybe just on the costs that we have or the revenues that we have? That is the baseline of what we're trying to focus on. We're not trying to identify new revenue. This is really about changing how we collect revenue, and that might result in different people paying, or some people paying less, or some people paying more. But it's really generating the same amount of money throughout the whole system. So as part of the study, we developed a framework, and that provides a structure for us in terms of how we can do this. So again, here we have our existing rate structure. The focus area 1 is looking at what is that new structure that could bifurcate those costs of sanitary and wet weather, and address those obligations that MSD has that are wet weather related, but they are not in any way duplicative of any stormwater costs that another entity is already doing. Because again, we're focused on what our wet weather costs are. SBU program, the overflow management that we have, wet weather facilities that we have, those are wet weather related. Some might call them stormwater related, but they're wet weather related to us. And those are different kind of costs than city stormwater has or Forest Park has, because they're managing their MS4 system, their separate storm sewer systems. Those are just important for you to recognize they're different things. We really talked through with the committees about, we're staying focused on MSD's part of the sandbox here. We're not focusing on anybody else's. It's just, what we have obligations to address. And again, this is really on the short term, we could, if the board chooses to proceed, this could provide short-term benefit as it relates to some improved equity or affordability. In the long term, it could provide some flexibility to some of those other stormwater entities to benefit from the framework that we're putting together with the methodology or with kind of some of the data that we've been developing through this analysis. So now I'll talk a little bit about how the solution was developed, and this includes the stakeholder collaboration process and the bifurcation, the impervious surface analysis, and our rate structure. So we're going to get through the next several slides, really touching upon this, and ultimately be able to give you a snapshot of what a rate or a bill impact would be for a typical user and some different kinds of users. So the study is involved in three major components. We have three major components that MSD is recommending be part of the framework if we move forward. So again, the first is a breakout of wastewater system costs that are specific to wet weather costs and specific to sanitary costs. So that's kind of a key part of the framework, to separate out those costs. The second is having a fee methodology that is based on impervious surface analysis. We've worked with CAGIS, we've worked with parks to do the kind of flyover data collection that was necessary to get to this first level. There would still need to be more analysis on the impervious area, but we have enough to be able to make some assumptions in the framework now. The third component is that the rate structure and the bill impact, as the framework that we've outlined, it would be tiered for residentials, and you're gonna see that. So a residential user would fall into a different category of imperviousness based on 5 tiers that we've developed, and we'll share that with you in a little bit. And the second component is that non-residential would actually be based on their actual imperviousness. So again, this is some of the stuff that we came out with, and you'll see how this is going to differ from residential to commercial. Along those lines too, we do recommend that we would have a credit program for non-residential customers, and that an incentive program for residents, if they wanted to install some green infrastructure perhaps on their property, we can have a program that would do something like that. And we're working on some concepts around that idea right now. And then the fifth, even though I don't have 5 up here, the fifth is really, again, continued public outreach to be able to get input. As Commissioner Reese mentioned, there would, be a desire potentially to incorporate institutions of higher learning, schools, churches and whatnot. And we can certainly consider that and include that. I also wanted to just lay out for you, so with regards to this, the stakeholders, how they also integrate, got to get involved with a lot of these things that all of the pillars, as we broke out the meetings in 4 different sessions, and this slide just kind of shows you the meeting dates, the topics that we discussed. Again, the first 2 sessions that we talked about were really kind of sharing information with the stakeholders and the agencies about our financial plan, our cost allocations, our recovery, how we did all that. And then this last 2 sessions, the third and the fourth, we're really getting input on the framework that we developed in the methodology and impervious stuff. In your packets, you also have different briefing papers. So after each of our meetings with the stakeholder groups and the agency groups, we kind of took that topic and really broke out the issue a little bit in a lot more detail. And so you have those briefing papers also that have Q&A type questions and whatnot. And we can again do deep dives on all of these kinds of things. We're only scheduled to come back next Tuesday, but we're happy to come back on one-on-one sessions or any other venue you guys would like us to do that for. And again, the goal for our public engagement sessions were to, create understanding of the current condition of, again, the drivers, the needs, get feedback on some of the policies, the concerns, as well as review the study findings, and ultimately, hopefully, be able to have support from those stakeholders that the framework made sense. So now we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive. I'm going to just talk through the methodology a little bit. This is the fee methodology for the feasibility study. So it kind of starts, again, with those 3 pillars, but the fee methodology is broken out here. So The bifurcation of our costs is an analysis that we did internally at MSD to try to identify specifically what are sanitary costs, what are wet weather costs. So we went through that process and have that bottom line number, which is really the annual revenue requirements for our wet weather programs and efforts. And that is a cost that is used to then serve as the numerator for essentially a mathematical equation, which is, that's how much revenue we need to get back. And then the next part of that is the impervious surface analysis. So again, based on the CAGIS data and the new flyover data of all of the impervious surface area throughout the MSD service area, we were able to determine how many billing units would essentially be needing to help recover those wet weather costs. Because as Karen said, imperviousness creates runoff, it creates costs for MSD. And so those billing units are then put into the calculation for us to essentially determine what the unit rate would be. So ultimately, we've gone through that process, and so we have the wet weather revenue costs, we have the billing units, and we have the rate. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pam Lemoyne, who's going to go through the bifurcation of our costs and how this, or maybe it's Prabha. Yeah, okay. I'm going to turn it over to Prabha. And Prabha, I just want to mention is, again, is the lead of the stormwater group and strategy and advisory group of Black and Veatch. She also co-authored this report on utility survey of stormwater charges and whatnot. So we are very lucky to have Prabha here to help us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to give a brief explanation of what the MSD system is. And it's important to just have a quick understanding of that. So when you look at the MSD system, as Ms. Marilyn mentioned, it's an integrated system. And what do we mean by that? It really means that the system has certain areas that is served by combined sewer where the sewage flows and the stormwater flows through the same pipe. And then there's also areas where the sanitary sewage flows through a separate pipe without stormwater essentially coming into that pipe for the most part. So that's what we call a combined sewer system and then a separate sewer system. But these are all, while there are two types of system, MSD is an integrated system because at the end of the day, all the flows that come through the system all combine at some point in big, large pipes, essentially go to the treatment facility. So it gets very commingled at some point. And so what it really means is that in the system, there are different types of flows that MSD really has to manage. So some of the examples of the types of flows are first sanitary sewer flow, which is really this is the sewage flow that occurs inside residences, inside businesses, and then comes into the system. The second type of flow is called infiltration and inflow, and usually the acronym I&I is used for that. So what is infiltration and inflow? Those are flows that are extraneous, meaning it really occurs outside thanks to the rainwater falling on buildings from rooftops, from parking lots, from driveways. All of those flows have to eventually come into the system. In addition, there's also groundwater flow. The ground itself, due to excessive saturation, generates flows. Now, those flows also end up coming into the system in multiple ways. One way is what we call normal infiltration and inflow. Even in very good systems with good piping, and even if it is not a combined sewer system, there'll be some level of infiltration and inflow that will come through the pipes because of the joints in the pipes and manholes and connections. That's called normal infiltration and inflow. In a system like MSD, there is also excess infiltration and inflow. Why is that? That's because MSD has a lot of aging infrastructure, like Philadelphia, like Seattle, a lot of aging infrastructure. So there will be what is called above normal infiltration and inflow that comes into the systems. And what really then happens is, while the collection system, the conveyance system can handle all these flows and bringing it, the problem is when it comes to a treatment facility, the treatment facility has only certain level of capacity. Not all the flows can be treated sometimes, especially in excessive rain events. And that leads to what is called a combined sewer overflow, because especially the flows that come through the combined sewer pipes If all the flows cannot go to the treatment facility, it leads to combined sewer overflows. And lastly, even in separate sanitary sewer system, sometimes when the flows are pretty excessive because of rain and other flows getting in, it cannot get to the treatment facility. So you also have some level of small volumes of sanitary sewer overflows. So these are all different types of flows. The reason this is important is MSD manages all of these things. Some flows are measured, some it's difficult to measure, but at the end of the day, MSD has to manage all of these things. And so we use the data that is available then to really determine the wet weather related costs. And we're going to talk a little more about it after Pam explains the total MSD cost.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pam Lemoyne again. So for this study, we started the study early in 2021, as Mary Lynn had indicated. So for the feasibility study, we utilized 2021 projected revenue requirements to determine the costs and the feasibility study. So it was based on the 2020 rate study that had been conducted and reflects 2021 projected expenses based on the 2021 operating budget at that time and the 21 to 25 CIP. So that provided us with the projected operation and maintenance expenses, debt service requirements on your outstanding debt, as well as capital outlay for office equipment, technology, fleet, and that sort of thing. But it also includes recognition of MSD's need to provide funds for cash finance capital and maintaining fund balances. So all of those revenue requirements then are reduced by any other sources of revenue that aren't rate revenue, such as permit fees, inspection fees, things like that, interest income. So after subtracting those miscellaneous revenues, that gives us the net revenue requirements that we're looking at in this feasibility study. So the total cost of service or the net revenue requirements in 2021 for this feasibility study was just over $260 million. So in taking, looking at the technical steps that we use to bifurcate what we're calling wastewater costs, wastewater meaning sanitary sewer plus wet weather related costs, we took 3 key steps in order to do that. And the first was recognition of or identifying the key O&M cost centers. MSD made this step really straightforward. MSD creates their budget based on clearly defined cost centers. So we were able to use those cost centers without having to undertake a detailed costing analysis to get to those key cost centers. The second step then was to determine the appropriate allocation basis for each cost center. We're not going to go into all that nitty-gritty detail today, but certainly happy to provide that, and you can find a lot of that in those briefing papers. But for each of those cost centers, we developed allocation factors to determine the percentage or the portion of those costs that should be recovered through sanitary sewer versus wet weather. And that provided us the ability to then determine what ultimately the total cost for wet weather allocation that may be appropriate to recover through an impervious surface charge. This slide then shows the cost bifurcation results. The top half of the graphic, you can see the first bar across the top is sanitary sewer. And the right below it is wet weather, with the blue showing the operating related costs, O&M, debt services, O&M costs and that sort of thing. And then the green are net capital costs. So those are debt service costs, cash finance capital, and so forth. And as you can see with the table down below, providing some additional details as far as what that resulting allocation was for both operating costs and net capital costs. And as you can see, the resulting allocation is a little over 50%, or $131.3 million is allocated to wet weather through this process.
So the 131 million based on existing revenue, again, that's not to generate new revenue, but based on the existing revenue analysis, $131 million is what is deemed as appropriate to recover from the wet weather fee structure. So that's the numerator. So then we need to have the denominator of the equation that Mary Lynn just talked about. So that we did an extensive impervious area data analysis leveraging the data that we were able to get from the county and going through that diligent process using industry accepted principles and GIS technology. We were able to come up with the impervious area by various land use or various customer categories. So what this shows, for example, really quick, not going into every detail, if you look at the single family residential, which stands, the SFR stands for single family residential, and MFR stands for multifamily residential, which is up to 2 dwelling units. They have the most number of parcels in the MSD service area, and really about 245,000 parcels. 63% of the number of parcels are held by those two categories of land use. But then if you look to the total amount of land area, they only have about 43% of the land area you see in that estimated gross area. That's called the total land area. And then the last chart that you see is actually the impervious area. While over 60% of the parcels are single family residential, they only have just over 40% of impervious area, because a lot of the impervious area is actually with non-residential properties because of large warehouses and all kinds of parking lots and all kinds of properties you have. So that just gives you a quick snapshot of what the impervious area shows up based on the data analysis that we have done. So then the next part is, how do you take all this? So we have the numerator, we know we have to get 131 million. Now we have an idea of the impervious area square footage for the MSD parcels. So this just gives you another quick snapshot of the same charts we showed you. In this step, what we also have to do is then take that impervious area and convert it into billing units, which is very similar to how you take the water usage, and the billing unit is usually expressed in terms of 1,000 gallons. You have to do something similar for the impervious area. So we take the impervious area, and we have defined for this analysis 1 billing unit as 500 square feet of impervious area. So we then take the total impervious area of each category of customer divided by that 500 square feet of impervious area, and that gives the billing units for each category. So the total billing units we have here is about 3,267,000 billing units for the impervious area square footage we have. So one thing I do want to mention here, we mentioned again that this is not for new revenue, but this is to really take the existing revenue, recover it in slightly different ways, so that there'll be some properties that may have a benefit in terms of cost in the charge, some may be impacted. But one thing to understand, in the 3,267,000 billing units, there are also properties that are never contributing to wastewater recovery at all. Example would be parking lots. If they don't have any bathrooms or toilets or anything, they are not contributing anything to cost recovery, but now they do send stormwater runoff. And so in this approach, they will be contributing because they will also become MSD customers. So now if you look at how do we take the billing units? So the initial billing units we calculated is about just over 3,267,000 billing units. But then we have to recognize that because it is based on impervious area, when this is launched, customers will have the right to appeal. They may say, hey, my impervious area that you have may not be totally accurate. We need a chance to look at that impervious area. That's called the appeals process. They have the right to appeal. So we estimate a small amount of loss of billing units due to the appeals process. In addition to that, as part of this framework, as Marilyn mentioned, we are planning to have a credit program as well, should the board proceed with that. And that is for properties that do manage stormwater on site. They have to have some ability to reduce their fee because it's only fair. If they're managing stormwater, they have to have some means of reduction. So we are also estimating some level of loss of billing units due to the credits that would be given to the customers. And that's the next blue box you see there. So from the initial billing units, we subtract those allowances for appeals, for credit, and therefore we estimate the final billing units that will be used for this in this analysis. And that's about 3,123 units. So we roughly lose about 1% or more of the billing units. So then what we do is then, now we have the numerator, which is $131 million of revenue we need to get from the wet weather fee. We have calculated the billing units, which is the denominator, which is a 3 million. So now we use the two to determine what the rate is going to be per 500 square feet of impervious area per month. And that rate, based on our analysis, we are projecting that to be $3.50. Now, one thing is important to note, this is all based on the fiscal year 2021 numbers. So when the board decides to implement such a fee, and depending on which year that implementation happens, this analysis will be updated to reflect that particular year. So it may not be $3.50 at that time, it may be something slightly different. But at this point in time, using 21 numbers, the projection is $3.50 per month per 500 square feet. So then we want to really talk, then using that rate, the $3.50 per 500 square feet as the basis, we then have to design what is called a rate structure. And so what we are proposing here is to have for all the single family residential and the two dwelling multifamily residential properties, having a 5-tiered impervious area charge. And we will show that in the next slide as to what that really means. That is for the single family residential. For all the non-residential properties, we expect that the charge will be individually calculated. And the reason for that is those properties are so different from property to property in terms of amount of impervious area they have. So it's industry best practice to have an individually calculated charge for non-residential properties. And the other thing we want to mention here also, there is not only properties with impervious area, as Karen mentioned, a lot of the properties have impervious area. But there are also some properties which is basically undeveloped land. But the question then becomes, why would you want to have undeveloped land in this equation? It's because during heavy saturated rain events, even undeveloped land contributes runoff, but significantly in smaller kind of quantities. So there is a small recognition that even undeveloped land contributes stormwater during wet weather events. And so that's also included in this mix in this analysis. And certainly we can do more deep dive during future sessions. So when we design the rate structure, there are certain fundamental principles we use. One is that properties have to be properties that are alike, have to be treated in a similar way. Properties that have significant differences, they have to be treated proportionally. That is fundamental for a defensible rate structure. And also we look at equity. Is the rate structure that we are designing, is it equitable in terms of how we assess the charge? Is it easy to understand for the customers? Because you don't want to have a complex rate structure that's difficult for customers to understand. It's not only about the customers, but it also has to be meaningful and cost effective for MSD to implement any kind of a new rate structure. So that also has to be considered. And then the option, if anytime you have a user fee, this being impervious surface charge being a fee, customers should have the right to be able to control that charge if they do something on that property. And of course, bill impact is an important consideration as well, because the whole driver was affordability. So all of these factors were considered in the rate structure that we kind of designed. So for the residential, the preliminary design right now that we are proposing is 5 tiers. So all the residential properties, their impervious area would be individually determined, but then based on which tier their impervious area falls into, then accordingly they will pay a charge. So according to this chart that you're seeing here, most of the properties will fall either in the 2nd tier or in the 3rd tier in the case of single family residential properties. So the last column shows the actual monthly charge that they will be paying under the wet weather impervious area charge. Again, this is only one component, because the other component is that 131 million is taken away from wastewater and recovered through the stormwater charge, which means their sewer portion of the charge will decrease, and that will be discussed later. So for the non-residential properties, it is going to be individually calculated. So an example here is a quick example. If a non-residential property, let's say, has 10,000 square feet, let's say it's a warehouse which has 10,000 square feet of impervious area, that will be divided by the 500, which is the basic unit. So they'll get 20 billing units, and each billing unit is $3.50 per month. So therefore, their charge will be $70 a month. So that's how the example calculation works. And this is how it will be calculated for every single non-residential property. And so for the undeveloped land, we talked very briefly about undeveloped land. So if a property has no structure in it, then the plan is that a small runoff factor will be assigned to the property. So that's the example we are showing here. So if a property has, let's say, 2 acres of land, which then actually equates to 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. So just the math is that if they have 2 acres of land, then basically that 43,560 square feet times 2, to that a small runoff factor of 10% is applied, so that an effective impervious area is estimated for that property of 8,000 square feet, And then that 8,700 square feet, then you divide by 500, which is a unit of basic unit. So they'll have 17 billing units, and that translates to about $60 a month. If the property is a large property with 2 acres. And the idea is any property even more than 2 acres, if there's a 10-acre property, still we are proposing a cap at 2 acres because a property that is significantly large will be in its natural condition. So there's no need to keep on charging them. So the first 2 acres will be kind of the cap under this approach that we are proposing. So now we can look at what's the impact of this on the bills.
Okay, so to determine the impact on the bills, as we mentioned earlier, for this feasibility study, we're not trying to recover or we're not trying to generate additional revenue. We're trying to evaluate the potential impact of a new rate structure that would change the way in which we're recovering revenue. So with the wet weather fee calculations that Prabha was just speaking to, we have $129 million, as we mentioned before, in sanitary sewage costs to recover, about 49% of the total wastewater system costs. So for this analysis, what we've done is looked at an across the board reduction in the sewerage service charges in order to isolate the impact of the wet weather impervious surface charge. As was mentioned before, we are looking at a holistic review of the overall rate structure. There's another board resolution addressing one component of the sewage service charge revenue as well. We're not talking about that as part of this presentation. We're really trying to look at just the impact of the wet weather fee, kind of isolating that alone. And then we'll be talking separately at a future date about the more holistic approach as well. So looking at the potential impact on customers, there are 3 different factors that influence what a customer's total wastewater charge. So wastewater being, again, sanitary sewer plus wet weather charge. The first is impervious area. How much impervious area does the customer have on the property? The second, meter size. What size meter, which lets you know what the minimum charge is on the sewage service charge, and then how much volume is on the bill. So the impact is not going to be the same for everybody, depending upon their mix for each of those factors. In the customer's bill, there will be a directional impact. Anytime you have any kind of change in a rate structure, there will be an impact on customers. Some customers' bills may go up, some customers' bills may go down. Some customers may not see a whole lot of a change. But the impact is not dependent on, is it residential or is it non-residential? Both of those customer classes may have a directional impact. The customer's bill, again, as we said, the impact is going to depend on the meter size, the volume of water used, and the impervious area charges. So for a given meter size, so customers with say a 5/8" meter or 2" meter and the same billed volume, as impervious area increases, the benefit of the charge reduction is going to decrease. But for a customer that's got a particular meter size and impervious area, the more volume they use, the benefit of the charge reduction will increase. So in other words, to say it differently, the directional impact for a customer that has a given meter size and impervious area, the more volume, the higher the volume, the greater benefit to that charge reduction. This graphic then shows an example of a couple of different potential residential bill impacts. At the top, you can see existing sewer rates, which are just the sewage service charges. So this example has a 5/8 residential customer with a 5/8" meter using 5 CCF of volume, and assuming they're in tier 2 for the wet weather impervious surface charge. Existing rates obviously are just the sewage service charge only. That's $50.88. But under this potential new wet weather fee and that across the board reduction in the sewer charges, you can see that sewage service charge component goes to $22.94. The wet weather impervious service charge would be $13.31. So that customer's total bill would be $36.25, or about just a little less than $15 cheaper than under the current rate. The graphic on the bottom, we'll let you study that a little bit more, but what this is showing is for a 5/8, two different customers, both 5/8 inch meter. One has 2 CCF of volume, one has 5 CCF of volume. And if, depending on what tier they're in, you can see what that total bill impact is. So just as an example, the first line, 2 CCF of volume in tier 1, they would see an $18.68 decrease in their bill. So that just lets you understand a little bit more the impact of the total impervious volume, impervious area on the bill impact. The next graphic then shows potential non-residential bill impact. The top is a 1 inch meter non-residential customer with 10 CCF of volume, and we've shown 3 different amounts of impervious area so that you can see the impact then. So you can see with a smaller impervious area, there's a bill reduction, and then with a higher at 45,000 square feet of impervious area, that their bill would actually go up $144. And then the second example is a similar example, but with 50 CCF of volume, just to show the relative impact.
Okay, so that I know was a whole lot of information. We tried to get you to the end to see what the impact was. It's, that's just a snapshot. Next week, we will be prepared to come back and do some deep dives. Specifically, we were going to, try to see what kind of questions you had today. But right now, we're thinking about coming back and talking about like how does this improve equity? Talk about that issue. Talk about the funding capacity with and without wet weather impervious surface charge. Talk about potential next steps of an implementation plan, those tasks, and as well as schedule of what that would look like. And because this is a major undertaking, this is not something that can be done quickly. It requires a whole lot of, more detailed discussion of different policies, as well as customer impact, communication and outreach and education, and not to mention also the billing change impact. Waterworks is actually in the process this year of doing a major upgrade with their billing system. They can't even touch this in terms of looking at how this would, needs to be updated in their billing system until next year. So this is a major undertaking, but we wanted to kind of give you just a snapshot, but high level one of what the potential framework would be, what the potential impacts would be, and talk about that in more detail next week. But I'm happy to take any questions today, even if they're just, you don't want a response on them, but you'd like to hear a little bit more next week about X, Y, or Z.
Thank you. I just have a couple comments, and I won't go through the book, but I heard you saying that you're not, all of you, you're not generating revenues, you're changing the way that you're recovering revenues, which is still difficult for me to try to wrap my head around because we were not getting impervious fees before. So you're trying to figure out how to, I just don't understand that. That's a new concept. So how can you just be, trying to recover revenues in a different way that you were not getting? So that you don't have to answer that now. But the other thing I noticed under the rate structure consideration, you said the properties should be treated similarly. And I was just wondering, when I looked at the resulting impervious area data analysis, I noticed that single family and multifamily were in the same group, 65%. And I was just wondering why you didn't separate that, because we know that what percentage of that is single family and what percentage is multifamily on channel 9, on page 9. So why did we put all that together if we're trying to, treat people similarly?
Yeah, just to explain that. The multi-family that we are referring to is only 2 dwelling units, not a building that has more than 2 dwelling units.
Oh.
So really just a duplex, and the single family is referred to as a single family. Anything more than 2 dwelling units, it's all in the multifamily apartment category.
Okay, that helps.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. I know it's, Vice President Reese, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Yes, just piggybacking on your questions. I think those are great questions. They don't have to all get answered today because I think people are watching. We didn't give them a whole lot. The impervious, I'm not really sold on it yet because to me, it's, for lack of a better word, it's a taxing on rain. And we're experiencing climate change. So we are getting more than we normally would be getting in terms of our climate is changing. So that could really, really go up on folks. A lot of times we do these rates, we always say, oh, it's 50 cents, it's $1.25. And when we get the bill, it seems like it's never at $1.25 or $3.50. It's always high. So I just want to make sure I got the concept. We're trying to shift versus pulling in. We're taking the burden off of supposedly one group of people and adding a whole new group of people with a burden who are also taxpayers. I do want to find out what would be the impact on county-owned properties, because that's the taxpayers, they pay our property. They pay the fee. We manage it, but there's out of their money. What's the impact on municipal-owned properties throughout the county? We got some smaller municipalities that own, parking, surface parking. Well, how would this impact those areas? Smaller areas, Lincoln Heights, Lockland, those smaller areas, as well as townships, because they will have to have a fee that they may not have right now. Also, reason why I mentioned the landlords, because a lot of times they pass that on to the renter. And most people do want to rent where they got some kind of parking. So I want to see what would that be with the landlords passing that cost on to the renter. And what burden would they have? So we might have saved costs with a homeowner maybe, but then we passed it on to a whole new group of renters. If the owner has a parking lot and currently doesn't have to pay doesn't have a toilet or bathroom or whatever, that would be a new fee on renters out here. So that's kind of where I'm at. Obviously, I'm on reduction for everybody, not necessarily shifting from one group to another. The formula, I appreciate you saying that we've got to make sure that it's easily understood. But even with this presentation, which was just a top line, you haven't even done a deep dive yet. It is complicated. And so I want to make sure a lot of times when we went from, to make things, I always like to make it very simple for people. When we went from going to the gas station where they would come out and pump your gas, wipe the windows, and the grid daddy said, man, if we go to self-pumping, we'll save a lot of money. And we got the highest gas prices than we've ever had when we had someone coming out pumping our gas. So I don't want to give a promise that we don't keep, not intentionally, unintentionally. Obviously, they thought we would save money if we get out, pumped our own gas, but we're not saving money. I want to make sure that this is something that really, I want to save people more than $3.50. I mean, for us to go through a whole rigmarole of changing the way we do our billing. So those are the questions I have. I do think more people need to be a part of this. I don't think I guess this was the Cliff Notes. This is still complicated, but we need to talk to people because they won't say anything now. They may not show up to this meeting now. They might have turned the TV off now because it's too, people are like, give me a 1 minute read, give me a 2 minute read. But when they get their bill, we'll start hearing from churches, nonprofits, municipalities, and we would have done this whole exercise and be talking about how we could change things. And it's no fault to you. I'm just saying, let's put those. I mean, it's a lot of folks that need to be included. I don't know how to include them, but they need to be told or notified, you're getting ready to be charged for the rain. If it's a lot of rain coming, you getting ready to be charged. You need to pay attention. Is this something you think is fair? So that we don't have people coming to us after it's too late. So those are my first look, I guess, things that I would want us to consider, Madam President. So I just want to put those on the table.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple, well, one very basic question. So when you do this calculation with 500 square feet equals 350 or $3.50, I have no sense of how big that is. How big is 500 square feet? Give me an example.
So 500 square feet, this is probably 1,000 square feet, would you say, where we're standing?
So 500 square feet would be literally a much smaller row home, probably half a row home, or I would say 3/4 of a small row home that would exist in old buildings. So really I would say it's not even a 1 bedroom, it would be a studio apartment would be a 500 square feet. If that
Okay.
helps you.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, I'm trying to put this in context of, a basic homeowner, has how many square feet equaling how much money that, this
Yes.
relates to.
So just maybe to help with that, the median single family residential in the MSD service area is 2,370 square feet.
That's helpful.
So majority of the single family residential properties in the MSD service area have 2,370 square feet of impervious area.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay. So, and that's, all these, this idea of who's impacted here, I think is what I'm trying to better understand. So, in essence, we've always had this concern that part of the folks that are using the system are subsidizing other folks that are dumping into the system, right? So we're trying to level set this so that the people that are responsible for all this water going into the system, that's the stormwater, are paying for that going into the system, as opposed to the residential customer who is not dumping that kind of volume into the system, yet subsidizing that for the property owner that is, right? So we're trying to create a more fair system, is my understanding. And I've heard this from the advocates for years, that one group is subsidizing the other group. Can we get to a more fair system when we're actually recognizing the amount of water that's being pushed into the system by one property owner, whether it's commercial or residential, versus the other property owner, right? So, and from my vantage point, and tell me if I'm wrong, the commercial property owner who's got the large parking lot is likely to see the increase, as opposed to the small residential homeowner that is likely to see a decrease.
That is correct. It's not only small residential owner. Like I said, a property that is about 2,000 square feet of impervious area, which is many of the homes in MSD service area. You're absolutely right. What is happening right now, I'll give you a quick example. If there is a small home with a 5/8 inch meter, all the majority of the homes in MSD service area, they have a 5/8 inch meter, nothing more than that. So depending on how much of water they use, if they may have a family household of 5 members, sometimes 6 members, depending on how big that household is, based on that, they're using water. While their home is still only about 2,000 square feet of impervious area. Contrast that with a Walmart, a Home Depot. They have very large impervious area, like 20,000, 30,000 square feet of impervious area. They may also have only a 5/8 inch meter because they just have a few restrooms. They may also have a 5/8 inch meter. But who puts more stormwater into the system? It's the Walmarts and the Home Depots of the world. And they are not right now contributing their fair share of what they're contributing. They are paying same like a 5/8 inch residential homeowner. So that's the example here to see why we are talking about equity when we are talking about this. So what happens really is because 130 million is bifurcated and recovered through the impervious area basis, the sewer charges will come down, and then they have to, in turn, they have to pay the wet weather charge. But depending on the combination that Pam was explaining, depending on how much water you use versus how much impervious area you have, you may see many of the residential properties may see a decrease, but definitely properties like the Home Depot and Walmart that have very large impervious area may see an increase. And this is not only residential versus non-residential. Let's take a small restaurant. A restaurant may have a 1 inch meter. But because of the nature of the restaurant, they have to use a lot of water in their business. So they are paying a lot of sewer charges, but they may have only a small 1,000 square feet mom and pop restaurant. And so they're also paying much more than their fair share than a Walmart or a Home Depot. So this just makes everybody, residential and non-residential, to kind of pay their fair share, depending on how much water they use inside their property, but also how much runoff they're sending from their exterior of their property.
Thank you. And I do want to highlight something that you said early on. So for the property owner that's got the large parking lot, I do want to make sure that we emphasize that if we were to move forward with something like that, we want to have an incentive for them to change the nature of their parking lots so that there is less runoff going into the system to begin with. So whether that is culverts or planting trees or changing the nature of the surface, I don't care. It's just a matter of creating a surface that is not creating so much runoff going into the system, because in the end, wouldn't it be great if we could reduce the amount of runoff going into the system? Because really that is kind of the gold standard. So I just want to highlight that as something that I hope is incorporated here as an incentive for a large property owner who, under this scenario would see an increase in their fee, but let's give them the opportunity to actually decrease some of that. So I just want to throw that out there. Also, I think it might be helpful, it would be for me, to get examples that are a little maybe simplified, because you all know what the average pipe, I don't know what the average pipe size is in my house. And so I think it might be useful, and it's very helpful for you to have identified, what the average home size is, because to put this in, some frame of reference for us. I mean, I really want to know what, an average homeowner with an average pipe size, with an average driveway, how are they going to fare underneath this scenario, as opposed to some other property owner. And I also am sensitive to this idea that we've got many nonprofits that have parking lots and may not have the capacity, depending on the increase here, to pay for that increase, because this will be something new that we're levying on these folks if we move forward with this. And I do want to be sensitive. Is it, whether it's a municipality or a nonprofit or a church or a rec center, or, I just think we do need to pay some attention to that and maybe handle them differently. I'm not really sure what that looks like.
Well, and it could be, if I may, it
yeah.
could be like a phased implementation too, that you just we take, bite-sized pieces of this and not like try to go full implementation from day one. You try to construct a way that.
No, just pull your
Oh, I'm sorry.
microphone up there.
Yeah,
Sam,
one option is to try to phase in the implementation. But yeah, hear you, and we can try to talk and speak to that. In terms of the credit program, we do have both a credit program, a credit for non-residential as an option in the, framework, and then more incentives for residential. And most residentials do have a 5/8 meter. So the examples we show there for residentials are your typical.
Okay, well, that's good to know too. And also an incentive, I guess, for the residential, because the less they use then, because they're not going to change the nature of the impervious surface probably with their driveway. But if they utilize less by way of what they're doing in their homes, then they will see a reduction, right? Because does the base charge go away under this?
No, the base chart, right now, we're just evaluating the wet weather impervious surface charge.
Okay,
Kind of as all alone with the existing sanitary charge. One next step that we want to do is to look at a holistic restructure of the rate that would then also include the evaluation of a reevaluation
yeah,
of the base charge. But we're not quite to that point yet.
okay.
But we would recommend that you do all of that at one time, as opposed to do one and then the other, and then, have a full implementation plan.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the base charge is what I think some people, if they don't use that much, and yet they pay this base charge. And I understand the reason for it. You've explained it a number of times that we need to have some stability in the fund. I get it. But yeah, that certainly would factor in here with all these other things. Okay, well, thanks. I look forward to future conversations about this.
Yeah,
and other
again,
presentations.
just thank you guys for letting us come here. And again, if you'd like to reach out individually, through your chiefs of staff or whatnot, we're happy to provide additional information.
Thank you so much. And those examples, those simplistic examples were very helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah. We'll
Thank
move, yes, we'll move forward. We have, Jeff Aludo has some resolutions that we need to take a look at very quickly.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to qualify this with the idea that as everyone probably knows, we are facing a winter storm warning for Wednesday night into Thursday, maybe into Friday morning. We currently, as the board is aware, do not have the ability at this point to do virtual meetings as existed under COVID. But we do have a couple of items on the agenda that I wanted to bring forward today as by leave items for the board to consider, given the fact that they relate to our Tax Levy Review Commission review process. And that process is getting ready to begin on Monday. We have consultant contracts associated with that. If we do not approve these this week, and I'm just anticipating that there could potentially be problems with potentially with a meeting on Thursday. I wanted to give the board the opportunity to consider approval of these today so that we could move forward with the TLRC process on Monday. So I have Lisa Webb here who could very briefly walk the board through these if the board does wish to consider this. If we did not do that, we would be looking at a delay, at least in the kickoff of the ability of the consultant to weigh in and be a part of the TLRC process on at least two of the levies that I think are kicking off for review on February 7th. So Madam President, I'll
Thank you.
defer to you in terms of the consideration of these, but Lisa is here if we'd like to go.
Certainly, we'd
quickly
like
go
to
through
hear
them.
from Ms. Webb. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, these are strictly a timing issue. The Tax Levy Committee has scheduled their February meetings, their kickoff meetings, in which the agencies will be making their presentations to the Tax Levy Committee as well as the individual consultants and getting the levy process started. The first meeting of that is scheduled for Monday, February 7th at 1 p.m. On Zoom. There's a link on the county website on the Tax Levy Committee's page for the public to attend as well. So if it is all right to proceed, there are 3 contracts before the commissioners related to those levies.
Did you have a question? Okay. If you. Yeah, why don't we get started on with the resolutions?
Not a problem. Just as background, these consultants, letters of proposals were requested from consultants in the beginning of December. They were received at the end of December. I believe they were due December 27th. The Tax Levy Committee reviewed a total of 7 different consulting proposals. Many of those consultants approached on all 3 of the levies to do reviews. All had experience with conducting levy reviews for Hamilton County over the last 10 years. The proposals that we're recommending for the indigent care levy is Public Consulting Group. The cost for that total review is $124,812. That is the most expensive of the reviews, but I would add that that is also the levy that includes the largest number of agencies to be reviewed. The mental health levy would be Health Management Associates at $101,000. And the senior services levy is Howard Warshbale and Company at $74,000. And all 3 of those contracts are before you for review. Leslie, do we have numbers on those or as far as?
Yes, resolution 2 is the indigent levy approval. And so if there are not any questions, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2 for the indigent levy.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution number 3 is mental health. If there are not any questions, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 3.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you. And lastly, the senior services levy, resolution number 4. I'd like to make a motion to adopt that one.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Yes.
Can I just want to bring something
Sure.
to light? Maybe we could have it at one of our meetings.
Mhm.
We had passed in our budget $1 million for senior citizens. And I wanted to make sure that's moving and grooving before we be putting a new levy on. And also we passed some funding for the diversity part with seniors. I don't know if there's possible to have you come back and present, where are we on this? Is it out on the